Welcome, I'm Jon Caldara, president of the Independence Institute and your devil's advocate. Later on in this program, a one-on-one conversation with Wick Rowland. He runs this station, so we'll have to be very nice. We'll talk about NPR funding, public television, public radio just can't get enough government money. Talking about governments, I thought we'd talk with the guy who destroyed the Republican Party single-handedly this year. Dick Wadhams, thanks for joining us, the chairman of the Republican Party, the outgoing chairman. You've decided not to run again.
In 2 weeks, I will be the former chairman of the Colorado Republican Party.
Well, won't that be nice for you? Now, it's a good paying gig. And we used to have honorary rich guys. You're kind of the first working guy who's taken on that job, and so there was a salary there. So now whoever gets your position, there's finally some cash. Of course, they have to raise the cash to pay themselves. That's
the little detail that I think some of these guys running for state chairman don't fully appreciate, is that there's not some $1 million pot sitting there that you just kind of draw from for 2 years.
Come on,
you have to raise that money.
It's Republicans. They're made.
Oh, you betcha. You betcha.
Why are you leaving? I mean, you've run Allard's campaign twice successfully, huge victories. Owen's first campaign as the campaign manager, that was a squeaker, first Republican governor in 25 years?
28 years. Yeah.
28? I thought it was 24.
First one to be elected.
First one to be elected.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
And of course, the Daschle upset where Senator Thune, you were his guy. Why are you leaving?
I've had 4 great years, John.
Now really sounding like the politician.
No, I really have.
Well, I've had 4 great years, but I need to spend some more time with my wife and kids.
Well, I don't have any kids at home anymore, and my lovely wife, Wendy, is not expecting me to be home for 10 hours a day. Believe me, I really did enjoy it. I mean, I loved being the person who got to be up front and taking on Governor Ritter and Senator Bennett and Senator Udall and their profligate spending ways and all the wonderful things we got to confront. I loved traveling the state. Was in 51 out of 64 counties over the last 2 years or 4 years. Loved the convention process. I loved it all. But after a while, it's time to do something else. And I was getting a little tired of the people who you have to deal with day in, day out, who have no understanding of the role of the state chairman of the state party.
I'm sorry. I promised I would stop calling you. Let's talk about the nuts, as you put them, in just a second. But tell me, did you play a role in why the Republicans lost the governorship and the U.S. Senator seat? A lot of people are pointing at you saying, it's Dick Wadhams. Dick Wadhams is out of touch, that you didn't vet these candidates carefully, and we had a wonderful implosion. This was our year. We had a 9%, we Republicans had a 9% generic poll lead for the office of governor. We've never had that before, and still we lost. And it's your fault.
There are 2 main responsibilities for the party in the general election, John. Number one, to have a free and fair and open nomination process that is open to any candidate who wishes to compete for our nomination and any Republican who wants to participate. And that's what we had. We had 70,000 people at our caucuses during the presidential campaign of '08, had 25,000 in 2010, a non-presidential year record. We had more than 70,000 more Republicans vote in our primary in 2010. So our nomination process was open to everybody, and we treated everybody fairly.
So in the same way, you're an umpire in that role.
That's right.
You're
I
not
don't choose candidates. I don't choose candidates.
You had nothing to do with the choice of McGinnis?
No.
Nothing to do with that at all?
No. Choice by who?
I don't know.
No.
Were you the guy that recruited Dan Mays to run?
I'm afraid not.
All right.
The fact is that we treated the most obscure, unknown candidate the same way as we did a former lieutenant governor or a sitting Weld County district attorney or the Senate minority leader in this process for governor and U.S. senator. The other thing we do, John, is we do the Get Out the Vote program called Victory. It's funded largely by the Republican National Committee, augmented by us. We only had a 6,000 registration edge on Democrats going into Election Day, but more than 108,000 Republicans, more than Democrats, voted in the general election. We essentially gave our statewide candidates a 108,000 head start before we even got to appealing to the unaffiliated voters. That's why we unseated 2 Democratic statewide officials, Bernie Busher and Kerry Kennedy. That's why we unseated 2 members of Congress, which was the first time, by the way, that's happened since 1964. First time we elected a legislative majority since 2002 and winning the House of Representatives. The governor's race, no state chairman has control over who gets nominated.
So for those people who say you didn't vet these candidates carefully, that it was your responsibility to make sure we didn't have anybody who was a plagiarizer or anybody who was using their campaign funds to make their mortgage. That's not. You can't do that.
You know what the vetting process is? We have a vetting process. It's called the nomination process. When candidates have to speak and to and answer questions from thousands of Republican activists in all 64 counties across the state over a grueling months-long process. That's the vetting process. And I'll tell you, John, we've had other people who have lost for public office in Colorado who didn't lose because they weren't vetted. Bob Beaupre, Pete Coors, Bob Schaefer. This was an extraordinary aberration we had in 2008 with this, 2010, with the emergence of Dan Mays, who only became the nominee after Josh Pennery pulled out in November, and then Scott McGinnis imploded over plagiarism charges, and then your friend and mine, Pat Stryker, and her buddies sunk $500,000 in negative ads against McGinnis. And who's standing
Which, by the way,
Dan Mays.
It's worth mentioning this. This is the first time I know of that Democrats played $500,000 in a Republican nomination because they knew that if McGinnis was injured and or hopefully couldn't get on the ballot, that they'd have a cakewalk going, and that worked. But
you're right.
If Dan Mays got out of the way, if he stepped aside and let Tom Tancredo run, would he be governor now?
Tom Tancredo?
Yeah.
I find it hard to believe that Tom would have defeated Hickenlooper. In fact, when Hickenlooper still got over 50% of the vote, not much over 50, but even with the 2 candidates on the race, I will say this: that Friday in early September, which would have been about the last day we could have gotten a new candidate on the ballot before the ballots were printed. We were that close. I had Tom Tancredo to getting both Tancredo and Mays out of the race. And I've talked about this publicly.
To get both of them?
Yes, and to give our vacancy committee, under state law, each party has a vacancy committee to appoint a new candidate. Tom Tancredo, I will tell you, to his credit, was up on that line saying, I'll get out if Mays does. He was there. Mays approached the line, and then he backed off, and the deal fell through. And I worked hard to try to get the 2 candidates. Had we done that, I think we could have found a candidate who would have won in November, or would have had a better chance at winning. I mean, it was very late in the campaign.
Talk to me about the nuts, as you called them. And you've been quoted about this. Now, both parties have extreme folks involved in it. And a lot of people think that, particularly this year, and let me tell you, I mean, you've been a lousy chairman, but this year I would say was beyond your control. But people are taking shots at you, and you've tell me about it. You said I've had enough of the nuts. To whom are you referring, sir?
I've said that I was tired of people who did not understand what the state party does, what the role of the state party is, and who see a conspiracy around every corner. And by the way, some people thought I was just talking about Tea Party activists, and by no means was I. I was talking about a lot of veteran activists as well. I think the Tea Party 912 activists and folks had a huge positive impact on our party. But there are voices within them that did see a conspiracy around every corner. They were convinced that I was somehow behind the entry of Jane Norton into the race for U.S. Senate. They were convinced that I was somehow behind.
And you weren't?
No, I was not. That I was somehow behind the exit of Josh Pennery. Josh Pennery has written very eloquently how I was not part of that. In fact, I will admit that I sent him an email that weekend imploring him to stay in the race, because I thought, think about this, Josh, before you get out of the race. And when you add all this up, I just got tired of the constant accusations and the why didn't the state party do this? Why didn't the state party do this? Why did you do this?
Anybody in particular?
And I'll tell you what I probably did a bad job of doing. is probably I just assumed people understood what the limited role of the state party is, that it has a very important function in any given election year, but it also is terribly limited, especially with these stupid campaign finance laws. And maybe I should have embarked upon an education process a long time ago, but I was giving the benefit of the doubt to those who get involved that they understood.
All right. You're not going to name any names, are you?
No.
Oh, but that's the fun stuff. There is a fight going on to replace you. And again, since now this is a paid position, whereas years ago we had rich guys who took it on more in a ceremonial role, but they were the guys who would squeeze people for money. Bruce Benson comes to mind, and Bob Beaupre, and they would do this as a charity, and then they'd hire somebody to do all the day-to-day stuff. But there seems to be a pretty big fight going on to replace you, and you weighed in on this fight with a letter pinpointing Senator Ted Harvey and a political activist named Matt Arnold, and took them to task for what?
Well, I am and remain neutral in the race to succeed me as state chairman, but I was not going to sit back and allow any of the candidates to say something false and very irresponsible about me or the state party. Ted Harvey unfortunately decided that the debt that I inherited in 2007, $600,000, that it took me 2 years to get paid off, was not done by me. It was done by being bailed out by the Republican National Committee. He was wrong. It was a lie. I could not stand back and let Ted Harvey say that. And so I took him to task, and I said, you must not understand how these things work, Ted. Money we get from the RNC is already spent by the time we get it, because it's already budgeted for get out the vote activities. And in Matt Arnold's case, he has accused me of sabotaging his Clear the Bench campaign, where
and this was the campaign, for those who aren't following, to make sure that the sitting Supreme Court justices that were up for retention this year would get a no vote, and of course they did not, although Mary Malarkey did step aside and decided not to run.
Right.
Some say it was because of health reasons, and some say it was because of all the political pressure that she had, and might have lost that seat if she went for retention. In any event.
Who knows? But the notion that I'm sitting around my office making phone calls, sabotaging anything, when I've got a governor's race, United States Senate race, all these congressional and legislative seats in front of me, is just preposterous. And you talk about a conspiracy theory. Matt Arnold is the king of them on this charge.
Got about a minute left. Tell me, what rich job do you have in your pocket? Because if I know political hacks like you, you wouldn't give up a great, fun job like this unless you had that next candidate or next job in mind. Do you have something lined up?
Don't have the foggiest idea what I'm doing next, John. I really don't. I really don't.
Have you ever tried to sell Tupperware? Tell me. I mean, you've been a campaign manager, and in fact, it seems to me that you were very close to going to the big show when Senator Allen was looking to run for president.
We had him here in your show.
We had him here. Are you going to go back into candidate?
Who knows? I really don't know. You know, I put myself through college working in a mortuary. Maybe I'll go back to the...
Which, by the way, is so very similar to Republican Party politics. Dick Wadhams, thank you. Thank you. Stay tuned. We're going to have a quick conversation with Rick Wolland. Wick Wolland. You'll understand.